The young woman in the wheelchair had only $3 for her birthday, a fact unknown to anyone until the black single father at the adjacent table approached her. The bell over the door of the Chicago cafe gave a weary jingle as she maneuvered her way inside. Her chair's wheels caught on the worn threshold once, then again, before she successfully navigated the entrance. A hush seemed to fall over the cozy Lincoln Park establishment. Conversations faltered, and coffee mugs paused halfway to waiting lips. David Johnson hadn't intended to stare, but he was captivated by the sheer determination in her movements. The intense focus etched onto her face as she propelled herself forward. Beside him, his daughter Zoe had stopped coloring, her blue crayon hovering over the wing of a half-finished unicorn. "Daddy," Zoe whispered, her voice a tiny thread of sound, but David placed a gentle hand on hers. "Just a moment, sweetie." The unspoken curiosity lingered between them as they watched the young woman make her way to the counter. She couldn't have been much older than 21, maybe 22. Her blonde hair was gathered into a messy ponytail that looked like it had been put up and taken down several times. A small frayed hole was visible near the shoulder of her oversized gray sweater, the kind of minor flaw that goes unnoticed when there's no one in your life to point it out. Her hands, gripping the push rims of her chair, showed a mix of resolve and something deeper, perhaps a profound weariness or a quiet resignation to the world. Mrs. Davis, the cafe's owner for the better part of 3 decades, a woman who had witnessed a lifetime of Chicago's heartaches pass through her door, lit up with a warm smile of recognition. "Chloe, happy birthday, my dear." The words seemed to ripple through the quiet room. David saw Chloe's shoulders stiffen for a fraction of a second before she forced them to relax. "Thank you, Mrs. Davis," she replied, her voice soft and carefully measured, the tone of someone who had learned to minimize their presence. 22 today, is that right? Heavens, I remember when you first started coming in. Was that 3 months ago? 4, Chloe corrected quietly. Her fingers fumbled with a worn wallet. Its original red color faded to a mottled pinkish brown. "Could I please get one of the small cupcakes?" David feigned an intense interest in the dregs of his coffee, but his attention was fixed on her. He watched as she carefully extracted the bills. 1, 2. Then she tipped a small zip-top bag, and quarters clinked onto the counter. 25, 50. She counted the change twice, her lips moving silently with the tally. "The vanilla one with the blue frosting?" Mrs. Davis asked, already retrieving it with a pair of tongs. "Yes, please." "How much is it?" $2.50. Chloe slid the exact amount across the polished countertop, the coins making a small, lonely sound. David noted with a pang that as she folded the wallet shut, it was completely empty. There was nothing left. Mrs. Davis placed the cupcake into a small white box with an exaggerated delicacy. "Would you like a candle, honey? It's on the house." For a fleeting moment, Chloe's carefully constructed composure shattered. Her eyes glistened with a raw, desperate emotion before she reined it in, locking it away. "Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you." She wheeled herself to a small table near the window, 2 tables away from David and Zoe. It was close enough for him to see the slight tremor in her hands as she opened the box. Close enough for him to watch as she placed the single slender candle into the cupcake's frosting with the precision of a sacred rite. And then she simply sat there. She didn't light the candle. She didn't take a bite. She just stared at the small confection as if it embodied every birthday she had ever spent in solitude. Judging by the look on her face, David suspected that might have been all of them. "Daddy." Zoe's voice was insistent now, her small hand tugging on his sleeve. "Daddy. She's all by herself on her birthday." The words struck David with a surprising force. He was intimately familiar with being alone. He had lived with that particular ghost for 3 years, ever since his wife, Sarah, had collapsed from an aneurysm during her morning run along Lake Michigan and never returned. But his solitude was different. He had Zoe. He had a reservoir of memories filled with boisterous birthday songs, cakes with too many candles, and Sarah's infectious laughter as frosting ended up on everyone's noses. This young woman, Chloe, her loneliness felt stark and absolute. "Nobody should be alone on their birthday," Zoe continued, speaking with the unwavering moral clarity that only a 7-year-old can possess. "That's a rule. David looked at his daughter, truly looked at her, and wondered when she had grown so perceptive, so attuned to the quiet hurts of strangers. "You're right," he heard himself say, his body already in motion. He stood, and Zoe bounced on the balls of her feet beside him, her eyes wide with anticipation. They closed the small distance between their tables in a few steps. Chloe looked up startled, her eyes a surprising shade of green, the color of new leaves in spring. But they were guarded, reflecting a history of expecting disappointment. "Excuse me," David began gently. "I'm David, and this is my daughter Zoe. We happen to overhear that it's your birthday." Chloe's hands dropped to her lap, her fingers twisting into a knot. "Yes, It's not a big deal." "It's a huge deal," Zoe interjected, her voice full of conviction. "Birthdays are the most important days of the year, right, Daddy?" "Absolutely right," David agreed, smiling at his daughter's fervor, "which is why we were wondering if you'd like to join us." No one should have to celebrate alone. Chloe's gaze shifted between the two of them, as if trying to decipher an elaborate prank. "I wouldn't want to impose." "You can't impose if you're invited," Zoe declared, already pulling out the empty chair at their table. "Come on, I have coloring books, and Daddy always orders way too many fries. We can share." A small, choked sound escaped Chloe's lips, something between a laugh and a sob. "I haven't colored in years." "Then you definitely need to," Zoe announced with authority. "It's very important for grown-ups to color. It helps with their feelings." David made a mental note to ask Zoe where she learned that, but Chloe was already wheeling herself over, a fragile glimmer of something like hope beginning to dawn in her expression. As she settled in at their table, David caught Mrs. Davis's eye from behind the counter. The older woman gave him a subtle, approving nod before turning to prepare something new. "So, Chloe," David said once she was situated, "Zoe is correct about the importance of birthdays. Do you have any special plans for turning 22? Chloe's fingers lightly traced the edge of her small cupcake box. "This is pretty much it." She hesitated, carefully choosing her words. "I don't really have anyone to celebrate with. I started a new job a few months ago at the Disability Rights Center down in the Loop, but I haven't really made any friends yet." "Why don't you have a family?" Zoe asked with her typical unfiltered curiosity. "Zoe," David began, a gentle reprimand in his tone, but Chloe raised a hand to stop him. "It's okay. I grew up in foster care. I was never adopted. I aged out of the system when I was 18. She delivered the lines matter-of-factly, as if discussing the unpredictable Chicago weather, but David could hear the years of practice it must have taken to say those words without her voice breaking. The statement hung in the air, heavy and profound. David thought of all the birthdays this young woman must have endured alone. 18 years navigating the system, 4 years fending for herself. 22 birthdays, and this might be the very first time someone had invited her to share their table. "Foster care?" Zoe asked, her brow furrowed in concentration. David could see her trying to process the concept. They had discussed different kinds of families, but this was uncharted territory for her. "It means I lived with different families while I was growing up, but only for a little while at a time," Chloe explained patiently. "It was like borrowing a family for a bit." Zoe considered this with solemnity. "That sounds lonely." "It was sometimes," Chloe admitted, "but it also taught me how to be strong." "Then you must be the strongest person in the whole world," Zoe concluded. David watched as Chloe's carefully maintained composure fractured again, just for a moment. "I don't know about that." "Zoe's right," David interjected softly. "It takes a remarkable amount of strength to build a life for yourself from scratch. To keep acknowledging your own birthday when there's no one there to celebrate with you, to keep finding reasons to hope." Chloe looked at him, her gaze sharp. "Who said I keep hoping?" "You're here, aren't you?" he countered. "You bought yourself a birthday cupcake. You accepted a candle from Mrs. Davis. You came to sit with us. That's hope." Before Chloe could formulate a response, Mrs. Davis arrived at their table. She carried a tray bearing 3 steaming mugs of hot chocolate piled high with whipped cream, and a much larger cupcake with "Happy Birthday, Chloe" written across it in elegant blue script. "A birthday special," she announced with a flourish. "This one is on the house." Chloe's eyes immediately filled with tears. "I can't. I already spent—" "Did I ask you for any money?" Mrs. Davis said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. Being 22 years old is an occasion worth celebrating properly. Zoe, without a moment's hesitation, grabbed a lighter from the counter and carefully lit both candles, the one on Chloe's small cupcake and the one on the new grander one. Make wishes on both of them, she instructed. That's double birthday power. Chloe laughed, a genuine, unburdened laugh this time, and David realized it was likely the first true expression of joy he had heard from her. "What should I wish for?" she asked, and it was clear the question was about more than just the candles. "Whatever you want most in the world," Zoe said seriously. "Birthday wishes are super powerful. They can change everything." Chloe closed her eyes. In the soft glow of the two small flames, David could almost see the child she must have been, blowing out candles in a succession of different kitchens, with a series of temporary families, likely always wishing for the same thing. When she opened her eyes again and blew, extinguishing both flames in a single breath, tears were freely streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she said, hastily wiping at her cheeks with the back of her hand. "I'm not usually. I don't cry." "Hey," David said softly. "It's okay. Birthdays can be emotional. Believe me, I've cried at my last 3. "Really?" Chloe asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Really," he confirmed. "Zoe had to bring me a whole box of tissues." "Daddy cries at everything now," Zoe informed Chloe with grave seriousness, "even commercials with puppies in them. But he says it's okay, because tears mean you're feeling things, and feeling things means you're alive." Chloe looked at David with a dawning sense of understanding. "You lost someone." It wasn't a question, but David nodded anyway. "My wife, Sarah, 3 years ago. A brain aneurysm during her morning run. Zoe was only 4. I'm so sorry." "Thank you. But we're learning, Zoe and I, that you can build something new from the pieces of what you've lost. It's not a replacement, but something different. Something that honors what you had while still making room for what could be." Chloe's hands wrapped around her hot chocolate mug, as if she were trying to draw warmth from more than just the ceramic. "I wouldn't know much about honoring what was. I don't even know who my parents were. The foster system records said my mother was young and overwhelmed. She left me at a hospital when I was 2 weeks old. No name, no note, just gone." Zoe reached across the table and placed her small hand over Chloe's. "That's so sad." "It used to make me really angry," Chloe admitted, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Every single birthday, I would wonder if she remembered, if she had any idea it was the day her daughter turned 5 or 10 or 16. But being angry is just so exhausting. Now I just coexist with it." "How did you end up in the wheelchair?" David asked gently, adding, "If you don't mind my asking." Chloe took a long sip of her hot chocolate before she answered. "It was a rock climbing accident when I was 18. The funny thing is, it was the first time I had ever done something just for fun. I had just aged out of foster care. I'd gotten a scholarship to community college, and some kids invited me to go climbing with them. I thought, why not? I'm finally free to make my own choices." She paused, and David could see her replaying the moment in her mind. "The equipment failed. It wasn't anyone's fault, just a faulty carabiner. I fell 30 feet. I woke up in the hospital, and I couldn't feel my legs. The kids who invited me, they never visited. I guess they felt too guilty. Or maybe they just didn't know what to say to the foster kid, who was now also paralyzed. That's when I really learned that being alone in the foster system was just training for being alone in the real world." David felt Zoe squeeze his hand under the table. His daughter, who had lost her mother before she could form lasting memories, seemed to grasp something fundamental about this young woman's pain that went far beyond her years. "You know what I think," Zoe said suddenly, her voice clear and bright. "I think you're wrong about being alone." Chloe raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Oh? You said you were practicing being alone, but I think you were practicing being strong," Zoe explained. "So that when you found your real family, you'd be ready for them." "Zoe, honey, I don't have a real family." "Not yet," Zoe corrected her firmly. "But Daddy says family isn't always the people you're born with. Sometimes it's the people who choose you, and we choose you." The words seemed to hang in the air, shimmering like notes of music. Chloe looked at David, her eyes searching his for confirmation to see if his 7-year-old daughter was speaking out of turn. Zoe's right, David said simply. We know what it's like to have an empty chair at our table, to have too much silence in the house. Maybe we could help fill some of that empty space for each other. You don't even know me, Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. I know you spent your last $3 on a birthday cupcake for yourself. I know you work to help other people with disabilities even when you're struggling. I know you've managed to survive 22 years without anyone to call your own. And you're still kind enough to accept a candle from Mrs. Davis, and gentle enough to humor a 7-year-old with a coloring book. And you're really good at drinking hot chocolate, Zoe added with a serious nod. That's very important in a friend. Chloe laughed, the sound watery and thick with unshed tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come to the shed aquarium with us on Sunday, Zoe piped up. They have sea otters, and they hold hands when they sleep, and it's magic. And you need magic in your life. How do you know I need magic? Everyone needs magic, Zoe stated as if it were an undeniable fact, but especially people who've had too many birthdays without any. David pulled out his phone. Give me your number. I should warn you, Zoe just learned about knock-knock jokes, so you might be getting a few dozen of those. As Chloe typed her number in with trembling fingers, she said, I should warn you back. I don't really know how to do this. The family thing, the friend thing. I might mess it up. Perfect, David said with a warm smile. We don't know how to do it either. We're just making it all up as we go along. Daddy says that's what all families do, Zoe added, now deeply focused on coloring a unicorn's horn a vibrant shade of blue. They just pretend they know what they're doing until one day they realize they actually do. Mrs. Davis reappeared, this time with a small paper bag. Leftover scones, she said, pressing them into Chloe's hands. For breakfast tomorrow. Birthday breakfast. Mrs. Davis, I can't keep taking things. You're not taking, dear. I'm giving. There's a difference, the older woman said gently. And Chloe, I've watched you come in here for 4 months. Always by yourself, always counting out exact change. Today is the first time I've ever seen you truly smile. That's worth more than all the scones in my kitchen. Chloe looked around the table, at David with his kind eyes and patient demeanor, at Zoe with her blue-stained fingers and fierce, open heart, at Mrs. Davis with her maternal insistence. Something inside her shifted, a tectonic plate of loneliness and grief finally giving way. The wish, she said suddenly, the birthday wish I made. You're not supposed to tell, Zoe exclaimed, her eyes wide with alarm. It won't come true. I think it already has, Chloe said, her voice filled with a quiet awe. I wished for exactly this, for people who would see me, not just my chair or my past, for a place to belong, even if it was just for one afternoon. Not just an afternoon, David said firmly. We do dinner on Tuesdays. It's nothing fancy, usually just spaghetti or takeout. Zoe always insists on dessert. You should come. And on Saturdays, we come here, and sometimes we go to the Lincoln Park Zoo, and sometimes to the library. And, oh, do you like movies? We have movie nights on Fridays, but Daddy always falls asleep. I do not always fall asleep. You snore, Daddy. Chloe. You'll hear him snore. The light-hearted banter continued, easy and warm, and Chloe felt a tension she hadn't even been aware of begin to dissolve. The late afternoon sun slanted through the cafe windows, casting golden stripes across their table. For the first time in her life, Chloe began to understand what people meant when they talked about the feeling of being home. David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and sighed. Zoe, we need to get going soon. Piano lesson in an hour. Can Chloe come to my piano lesson? Why not? She can watch me play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star really badly. Chloe laughed. As tempting as that is, I should probably get going too. This has been... She trailed off, searching for a word that felt adequate. This has been the best birthday I've ever had. Wait! Zoe jumped up from her seat and carefully tore the unicorn picture from her coloring book. She grabbed a crayon and painstakingly wrote across the top, Happy birthday, Chloe, from your new family. Chloe accepted the drawing with unsteady hands, holding it as if it were a priceless artifact. Thank you, Zoe. I'll treasure this. You better frame it, Zoe said seriously. It's going to be worth a lot of money when I'm a famous artist. As they prepared to part ways, David helped Chloe arrange the bag of scones so they were secure on her chair. Their hands brushed for a moment, and Chloe felt a jolt, not of romance, not yet, but of pure, unadulterated connection. Sunday at 10, at the aquarium entrance, David confirmed. Zoe wasn't kidding about the hand-holding otters. They really do sound like magic, Chloe said, her eyes on Zoe. Exactly like magic. As Chloe wheeled toward the door, she turned back one last time. David, thank you for seeing me. Not the chair, not the foster kid, not the tragedy. Just me, Chloe, David said, his voice full of sincerity. That's all we ever saw. Outside on the bustling Chicago sidewalk, Chloe paused, looking down at Zoe's drawing. The unicorn's horn was crooked and its legs were uneven, but it was the most beautiful thing she had ever owned. She carefully folded the paper and tucked it inside her jacket, placing it against her heart, where 22 years of accumulated emptiness suddenly felt a little less heavy. Back inside the cafe, Zoe tugged on David's hand. Daddy, do you think Chloe knows we need her too? David looked down at his wise, wonderful daughter. What do you mean, sweetie? Well, she thinks we're helping her, Zoe explained. But really, she's helping us, right? Our family got smaller when Mommy went to heaven. Now, it's getting bigger again. You are absolutely right, Zoe, David said, his heart swelling. Sometimes helping someone else is really the best way to help yourself. Is that why you look less sad, Daddy? Because of Chloe. David considered this. He hadn't consciously realized it, but his daughter was right. For the first time in 3 long years, he felt something inside him shifting. It wasn't healing, not exactly, but it was an opening, a making of space. Maybe it is, baby girl, he whispered. Maybe it is. That night, David's phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. It was Chloe. I've been practicing my knock-knock jokes for Zoe. Fair warning, they're terrible. He smiled, typing back a reply. Perfect. Terrible jokes are a family tradition. There was a pause before her next message appeared. Family. I like the sound of that. Get used to it, he typed. Zoe has already planned our next 6 months of activities. I hope you like zoos, parks, and apparently a lot of sea otter-related excursions. The Shed Aquarium on Sunday became the first of many shared adventures. Chloe arrived early, a nervous energy radiating from her as she waited by the grand entrance. Zoe spotted her from across the plaza and broke into a full-speed run, leaving David jogging to keep up. Chloe, you came. I said I would, Chloe replied, catching Zoe in an embrace that was slightly awkward but deeply genuine. I even brought knock-knock jokes. Tell me, knock-knock. Who's there? Otter. Otter who? Otter be a great day because I'm here with you. Zoe dissolved into a fit of giggles, and David realized this might have been the first joke Chloe had ever told a child. It was the first of many firsts they would share. Inside, the humid air of the Amazon Rising exhibit wrapped around them like a warm blanket. They marveled at jellyfish pulsing like alien hearts and watched penguins waddle with comical importance. Zoe was enthralled, a constant stream of questions and observations. Look, Chloe, a stingray smiled at me. In the oceanarium, they found the sea otters. Chloe watched, her face transformed with a kind of pure, childlike wonder that a lifetime of hardship hadn't managed to extinguish as 2 of them floated on their backs, lazily holding paws. They're beautiful, she whispered. You're beautiful, Zoe said, with the simple conviction of a child stating a fact. The otters know it. That's why they're showing off for you. Chloe's eyes met David's over Zoe's head. And in that silent glance, he saw everything she couldn't yet say. Thank you for this. Thank you for her. Thank you for seeing me as beautiful when the world taught me I was disposable. He gave a slight nod. Message received. They spent 3 hours at the aquarium. Chloe, it turned out, had an encyclopedic knowledge of random marine facts, making Zoe shriek with laughter with stories about how sea stars eat by pushing their stomachs out of their mouths. David found himself watching Chloe more than the exhibits, seeing the walls she had built around herself come down brick by brick, dismantled by Zoe's relentless and infectious enthusiasm. Over lunch in the aquarium's cafe, Zoe made an announcement. Chloe, you should come to my school's Thanksgiving play. I'm going to be a pilgrim. Zoe, that's not for 2 months, David reminded her gently. So what? Chloe needs to prepare. Being in our family means you have to come to all my shows, even the bad ones. Especially the bad ones, David added with a grin. Chloe laughed. I don't know if I quite count as family after one aquarium trip. 2, Zoe corrected. The cafe was 1. This is 2. That's practically forever in friend time. As they left the aquarium, Chloe said quietly to David, Is she always this incredible? Pretty much. Though, fair warning, she's also stubborn, hates broccoli with a passion that seems excessive, and will con you into reading the same bedtime story 17 times in a row. Sounds perfect, Chloe said, and she meant it. Tuesday dinner became a tradition before any of them consciously decided it was one. The first time, Chloe arrived with a store-bought apple pie, apologizing that she didn't know how to cook. The second time, she brought ingredients for spaghetti and asked David to teach her. By the fourth Tuesday, she was making her own contribution to the meal, lumpy mashed potatoes that Zoe declared the best she had ever eaten, even though they all knew it wasn't true. It was during the sixth Tuesday dinner that Chloe finally shared the whole truth about her disability. I lied, she said suddenly, placing her fork down on her plate. About the rock climbing. I mean, it was a climbing accident, but it wasn't an equipment failure. David and Zoe waited, their expressions patient and open. I jumped, Chloe said, her voice barely a whisper. I was 18, just aged out of the system. I had no plan, no family, no hope. I went climbing by myself, and I just let go. I wanted everything to stop hurting. She took a shaky breath, her eyes fixed on the table. I survived, obviously. Paralyzed, but alive. The doctors said it was a miracle I wasn't dead. I didn't feel very miraculous at the time. Zoe got up from her chair, walked around the table, and wrapped her small arms around Chloe's neck from behind. I'm glad you survived, she said softly. Me too, sweetie, Chloe whispered back. Me too. David reached across the table and took Chloe's hand. Thank you for telling us, he said, his voice thick with emotion. For trusting us with that. The thing is, Chloe continued, her voice gaining a little strength, after the accident, I had to go to therapy. Lots of it. And my therapist kept asking me, what are you living for? For the longest time, I didn't have an answer. But now, she looked around the small kitchen, at Zoe's colorful artwork taped to the refrigerator, at the mismatched plates David had bought at a thrift store after Sarah died, because their old wedding china held too many ghosts, at the three-place settings that had become as natural to them as breathing. Now I know. I was living for this moment, for Tuesday dinners and aquarium trips and terrible knock-knock jokes. I was living to find you both. We found each other, David corrected gently. That's how the best families work. The months passed in a blur of ordinary moments that felt extraordinary simply because they were shared. Chloe taught Zoe how to paint with watercolors in messy sessions that left more paint on their clothes than on the paper. David helped Chloe navigate the dense bureaucracy of finding a better apartment, one with proper accessibility and room for a real bed instead of the lumpy fold-out couch she'd been sleeping on for years. They celebrated Zoe's 8th birthday with a party that Chloe organized with the precision of a military general, complete with a sea otter theme that made Zoe shriek with pure delight. Chloe met David's sister via a video call and was immediately welcomed into the extended family. So, you're the Chloe we keep hearing so much about. Zoe says you're her best friend. Also, apparently you make better mashed potatoes than I do, which I find personally offensive and will need to verify in person immediately. Halloween arrived, and Chloe showed up at their door in an elaborate costume, Professor X from the X-Men, wheelchair and all. If you've got it, flaunt it, she said with a confident grin that would have been unimaginable just 6 months prior. Zoe went as a mermaid, and David threw on a last-minute pirate costume that Zoe insisted made him look totally cool, Daddy. They trick-or-treated through the neighborhood, Chloe's wheelchair decorated with flashing blue lights that Zoe had helped install. Several kids asked about her cool wheels, and Chloe let them take turns pushing her, transforming what could have been an awkward encounter into a fun adventure. At Thanksgiving, Chloe sat at David's table with his parents, who had driven up from Florida. Zoe announced to everyone that Chloe was her bonus sister, a term she had invented that made Chloe cry quietly into her stuffing. I always wanted another daughter, David's mother said, patting Chloe's hand. The universe works in mysterious ways. Christmas arrived with the first real Chicago snowfall of the season. Chloe appeared at David's door on Christmas Eve with a small, awkwardly wrapped package and a confession. "I've never had a real Christmas morning. Foster care did its best, but it was always institutional." "Well," David said, pulling her inside where Zoe was practically vibrating with excitement. "Prepare to be overwhelmed. My daughter believes in Christmas with the intensity of 1,000 suns." They stayed up late assembling a ridiculously complex dollhouse David had bought for Zoe, with Chloe reading the instructions aloud while David cursed at the tiny plastic pieces. When Zoe found them asleep on the living room floor on Christmas morning, surrounded by dollhouse furniture and empty hot chocolate mugs, she declared it the best Christmas ever before waking them up by jumping on both of them. Chloe gave Zoe the unicorn picture she had colored that very first day in the cafe, now professionally framed and matted. Zoe cried and hugged her so hard Chloe could barely breathe. She gave David a handsome leather-bound journal embossed with the words for new chapters, and he had to excuse himself to the bathroom for a moment to compose himself. Their gifts to Chloe were simple, but they were everything. From David, a key to the house. "Your family. Family has keys," and from Zoe, a handmade book titled Chloe's First Year with Us, filled with photos that neither of them had realized Zoe had been secretly taking with David's phone. New Year's Eve found the three of them on the roof of David's apartment building, wrapped in thick blankets, watching fireworks explode over the city skyline. Zoe had fallen asleep an hour ago, curled between them like a small, snoring mermaid. "I have something to tell you," Chloe said quietly. David tensed, a familiar old fear surfacing. "People leave. People always leave. I got promoted," Chloe continued. "Full-time coordinator position with benefits." She paused. "And they want me to start speaking at conferences. About survival, about building a life after trauma. They think my story could help people." "Chloe, that's incredible." "I said yes, but only on the condition that I could bring my family to some of them." "Zoe wants to see the ocean, right?" David's throat felt tight. "She does." "Well, there's a conference in San Diego in March." "We'll be there," he said without hesitation. As midnight approached, Chloe said softly, "I tried to kill myself on a mountain, and instead, I found a reason to live in a $3 cupcake and a 7-year-old's unicorn drawing. If that's not proof that the universe has a twisted sense of humor, I don't know what is." "Maybe it's proof the universe knows what it's doing," David suggested. "Putting broken people together to make something whole." "Something like that." Zoe stirred in her sleep, mumbled something about otters, then settled again. "David," Chloe said, as a cascade of glittering fireworks lit up their faces. "Yeah? Thank you for seeing me that day in the cafe." "You saw us too," David reminded her. "Two lost souls pretending we had it all together." "3 lost souls," Chloe corrected, looking down at Zoe. "But not lost anymore." February brought an unexpected trial. Chloe got sick, dangerously so. A kidney infection that her compromised system struggled to fight off landed her in the hospital. David and Zoe became permanent fixtures in her room, ignoring official visiting hours and charming the nursing staff into looking the other way. "You don't have to stay," Chloe said weakly on the third day, her voice raspy. "Family stays," Zoe said firmly, not looking up from her coloring book. "That's the rule." It was during this hospital stay that they met a woman from Chloe's past, Ms. Martinez, a tired-looking social worker who had managed Chloe's case for years. She teared up when she saw Chloe surrounded by people who so clearly adored her. "I always wondered what happened to you," she told Chloe in a private moment. "You were one of the ones I worried about most. No family, aging out, then the accident. I'm so glad you found your people." "They found me," Chloe corrected, her gaze drifting to the corner where David was patiently helping Zoe with her math homework. "Or maybe we all found each other." When Chloe was finally discharged, she returned home to find that David and Zoe had completely reorganized her apartment, making everything more accessible and adding touches of home. Zoe's artwork on the walls, a cozy new blanket on the couch, a framed photo from Christmas on her bedside table. "You didn't have to do all this." "Family," David and Zoe said in perfect unison, then burst out laughing. March arrived with the San Diego conference. Chloe, poised and confident, spoke to a room of 500 people about resilience, about finding family in the most unexpected places, and about how a $3 cupcake had changed the entire trajectory of her life. David and Zoe sat in the front row, Zoe holding up a brightly colored sign that read, "That's our Chloe," with hand-drawn sea otters all around it. After her speech, a young woman in a wheelchair approached her. "I'm aging out of the system next month," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm terrified." Chloe took her hand. "I was too. But can I tell you something? The family you're meant to have might not be the one you were born into. They might be waiting for you in a cafe, or an aquarium, or someplace you haven't even imagined yet. Don't give up before you find them." On the beach that evening, Zoe ran ahead, chasing seagulls and shrieking with pure joy at her first real glimpse of the ocean. David and Chloe moved more slowly, her wheelchair struggling in the soft sand, until David helped her navigate to a firmer spot. "She's going to remember this forever," Chloe said, watching Zoe spin in circles with her arms outstretched to the sky. "So will I," David said. "So will you." "My first family vacation," Chloe mused, "at 23. "First of many," he promised. They watched the sunset paint the Pacific in shades of gold and rose. Eventually, Zoe returned, flopping down beside them, exhausted and covered in sand. "Chloe," she said sleepily, leaning against her, "I love you. I love you too, my little mermaid." "And Daddy loves you too," Zoe continued, her eyes already closing. "He just sometimes forgets to say it because he's scared of feelings." "Zoe," David protested, but he was laughing. "It's true. But it's okay, because Chloe knows. Right, Chloe?" Chloe reached over and took David's hand, her fingers lacing with his. "I know." And she did. It wasn't romantic love. Not yet. Perhaps someday. Perhaps not. But it was family love. Chosen love. The kind of love that builds itself from Tuesday dinners and museum trips and hospital vigils. The kind of love that saves you. 1 year to the day after their first meeting, they returned to the same table in the same cafe. Mrs. Davis brought out a cake she had made especially for the occasion, 3 layers high and covered in fondant sea otters. "For my favorite family," she said, beaming. The Chloe sitting there now was a different person. She was still in the wheelchair, but she sat taller with a confidence that radiated from her. Her hair was longer and healthier. She wore a bright purple sweater that Zoe had picked out for her, one with no holes. She laughed easily, touched freely, and took up space in the world as if she finally believed she deserved to be there. "Make a wish," Zoe commanded as Chloe prepared to blow out the single candle. Chloe looked from David to Zoe, then to Mrs. Davis, her gaze sweeping over the small cafe that had been the starting point for everything. "I don't need to," she said softly. "Everything I could ever wish for is already here." "Wish anyway," Zoe insisted. "Birthday rules." So, Chloe closed her eyes. She didn't wish for herself this time. She wished for all the other Chloes out there, sitting alone on their birthdays with $3 and a heart full of hopelessness. She wished for them to find their Davids and their Zoes. She wished for them to learn that family isn't about blood, or adoption papers, or any official document. Family is about showing up. It's about seeing someone's pain and choosing to sit with them in it. It's about aquarium trips and terrible jokes and Tuesday dinners that taste like belonging. She blew out the candle and Zoe cheered, and David squeezed her shoulder, and Mrs. Davis wiped away a happy tear, and Chloe knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that she was finally, completely, unconditionally home. 3 years after that first birthday, Chloe wheeled down an aisle scattered with hundreds of paper sea otters. Each one had been colored by a child from the foster care group home, where she now volunteered every weekend. David waited for her at the end of that aisle, with Zoe beside him, serving as the world's most enthusiastic flower girl. They had fallen in love slowly, carefully, like two people who understood what it meant to lose everything and were terrified to risk their hearts again. But real love, the enduring kind, doesn't ask for permission. It just grows, steady and sure, through shared struggles and small, quiet victories. "Do you take this woman?" the officiant asked David. "We already did," Zoe announced loudly from her spot. 3 years ago. "This is just paperwork." The small congregation erupted in laughter. David's family, Chloe's colleagues, the kids from the group home, and Mrs. Davis in the front row crying into a handkerchief. "But yes," David said, his eyes locked on Chloe's, holding their entire story. "Forever. Yes." When they kissed, Zoe opened a small box she had been secretly holding. Real monarch butterflies fluttered out, spiraling up into the blue sky like visible wishes taking flight. Later, Chloe would ask her how she managed it, and Zoe would simply reply, "Magic do." At the reception, Chloe's former social worker, Ms. Martinez, made a speech. "I've been in this field for 20 years. I've seen a lot of kids age out of the system. Most of them struggle. Some don't make it. But Chloe proved that sometimes the family you need has been waiting for you in the most unexpected place. Sometimes it just takes one person seeing you, really seeing you, to change everything." David's sister added, "When David first told me about Chloe, he said, 'We're helping this girl who has no one.' But watching them these past 3 years, I realized Chloe wasn't the only one being saved. She saved David and Zoe too. She saved them from grief, from closing themselves off, from forgetting that life can still be beautiful after loss." The $3 cupcake made an appearance. Mrs. Davis had recreated it exactly down to the vanilla cake and blue frosting, though this time it was surrounded by a feast that filled the entire hall. Chloe took a bite and remembered the girl she used to be, the one who counted out exact change, who thought $3 was all she had to offer the world. "What are you thinking about?" David asked, spinning her wheelchair in a graceful dance move they had perfected over the years. "That I'm glad I didn't die on that mountain," Chloe said simply. "That I'm glad I made it to 22. That I'm glad I had exactly $3 that day." "Not a penny more or less," David agreed. "Any more, and you might have bought 2 cupcakes, eaten alone, and left before I could work up the nerve to talk to you." "I would have noticed you anywhere," Chloe said, then added with a smile, "but I'm glad it was there." Our place, Zoe interrupted their dance, demanding to be lifted onto Chloe's lap, another move they had perfected. David supported Zoe's weight as she balanced on Chloe's chair, and the 3 of them spun together, a perfect, chaotic, beautiful constellation, the only people in their world. The story ends here, but in truth, it never really ends, because somewhere, right now, there is someone sitting alone, counting out their last few dollars, believing they are invisible. And somewhere else, there is someone who could see them, if only they would look up from their own life for just a moment. Your story isn't over. Your family might be waiting in the most ordinary of places. All it takes is the courage to be seen and the kindness to see others in return.